tonight, where the president is no doubt thinking about whether or not he's going to sign this immigration compromise deal that was reached by Republicans and Democrats and avoid another shutdown, which could happen as soon as Friday. Among other things, this new deal would allocate $1,375,000 for 55 miles of new wall, new fence, whatever you want to call it, along the southern border. But now there may be another deal on the table. The president tweeted this moments ago, which just presented the concept and parameters of the border security deal by hardworking Senator Richard Shelby. Looking over all aspects, knowing that this will be hooked up with lots of money from other sources, we'll be getting almost $23 billion for border security. Regardless of wall money, it is being built as we speak. Here now with the inside story, two congressmen involved in the border deal negotiations, Republican Tom Reed and Democrat John Garamendi. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Congressman Lee, let me start with you. What do you think? What does he mean by that? What does the president mean by that?
Yeah, I think what the president's looking at is the money that's in the appropriations process, not to get too inside D.C., but this is money that can be reprogrammed, that can be looked at for national security use. And I think what the president's doing is coupling this deal with those resources and committing the first priority that we should all be, protecting our border.
Now, Tom, you and I have been working together in harmony, but that's not a harmonious statement. Those additional money beyond the 1.3 are projects that have already been appropriated, and these are civil works projects and military construction projects that were deemed by Congress, by the military, by communities across America that were necessary to recover from the various disasters and to prevent flooding in the future. In my own area, it's about $2.5 billion of absolutely essential flood control programs.
Let me ask you both this, yeah. Congressman Reed, you start. Would the money that the president is talking about take away from disaster relief or rebuilding money? Is that true?
Yeah, there's different pots of money that could be reprogrammed and put towards border security, not just at the border, but across the whole spectrum of border security. So, you know, I understand the concern that John's raising. It's a legitimate concern, but this money is on the table, and let's put it to use to protect our fellow American citizens.
Tom, we've worked so closely together, but the reality is that money has been appropriated for specific projects, some $4 billion in Houston, Texas to repair the levees and the dams in Houston, another $2 billion in Puerto Rico, money in Florida, money in California, all of it absolutely essential to protect lives in the communities all across the nation. Could the president do it? He'd have to declare a national emergency. To do so, at least in the Army Corps of Engineers, there is some military construction projects that have in the past been reallocated for work in Afghanistan and Iraq. But once again, all of these are deemed to be highest priority by local communities, by states, as well as by the military.
You know, but really, in the scheme of things, the gap that exists between the $5.7 billion that he wanted and the 1.3, close to 1.4 that is in this deal could potentially be closed with transfer authority funds that are taken from some other projects and move as the money is moved around. Are you saying, John Garamendi, that would that be a deal breaker for you if that gap was closed that way?
Well, I think it's a 1-2 punch. The first punch would be the signing of the current legislation that has been the compromise by the committee. The second punch would come later. But I will tell you, there will be a huge outcry, and there'll be lawsuits left, right, and center.
Because you don't want the border to be secure?
No, not at all. I want people to be protected with these flood control projects, with the disaster relief money that we have already held the hearings, made the determination that these projects are essential for the protection of life throughout the United States.
Last quick thought, Congressman Reed.
But I think the first step needs to be recognized, and I think that's where there's agreement here. Let's avert a shutdown, move this issue of the $1.3 billion that we've agreed to, that seems to be a reasonable proposal that I can support, and then move on to this other issue. But first and foremost, let's take care of this.
Would Republican support for this bill fall apart if the president sticks to his word there?
Well, I think there's support from a center-out approach on this compromise, because I think there's many of us who want to avert a shutdown, get the money going to the border to secure the border, as well as border security improvements elsewhere, which is also going to be.
Let me add just one thing here. One thing here is that the process of legislation goes forward. This is not the end of the process. If the president has projects that he thinks are critically important, come to the legislature, and we'll talk about funding those things. And it's quite possible some, or maybe all of them, would be funded.
All right. Congressman Garamendi and Congressman Congressman Reed, good to have both of you with us tonight. Come back. Hope you'll come back. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good to see you tonight.
Lawmakers are reaching a tentative agreement to avert a second government shutdown just days before the deadline. The deal, which includes only $1.4 billion for border funding, now heads to the president's desk for the final stamp of approval. President Trump and Beto O'Rourke making it clear in their dueling rallies last night that the Republicans and Democrats still do not see eye to eye on a wall.
Walls work. Actually, there's nothing like them for what we're talking about. We want to stop drugs. We want to stop traffickers. We want to stop criminals from coming in. Walls save lives. Walls save tremendous numbers of lives.
Safe, not because of walls, but in spite of walls. We stand for America, and we stand against walls.
Joining us right now is Tennessee Senator and Judiciary Committee member Marsha Blackburn. Senator, it's good to have you on this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
With you. Sure.
So let's talk about what you've come to in terms of an agreement. The committee, I guess, coming to this temporary agreement about $1.4 billion toward wall funding. That's way lower than the president wanted. Would the president sign this, do you think?
I don't know if the president will sign it or not, but I do know this. It does put 55 additional miles of wall building on that southern border, and this is something that Americans want to see. They want to see the border secured, and just as the president said so well, ending the influx of drugs and sex traffickers, human traffickers, gangs that really make our communities unsafe. And Maria, as I've continued to say through this entire debate, until you secure that southern border, every town's a border town and every state a border state because of traffickers and gangs and violence and drugs and the unsafety and those conditions that are brought to our communities.
Yeah, but is it worth signing on to something that includes a decline in the number of beds at the ICE detention centers? This weekend on Sunday Morning Futures, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham broke the news with us on Sunday, telling us that the president will not sign a bill that cuts the number of ICE detention beds in his facilities. Watch this. I'm surprised that this is something that's coming up now in the 11th hour. Has this been an issue in terms of reducing the number of beds?
No.
Before?
I promise you this, Donald Trump is not going to sign any bill that reduces the number of bed spaces available to hold violent offenders who come across our border. He can't do that. He won't do that.
Senator, what about that? What is the significance of the decline in beds?
I have been in those detention facilities, and I encourage any Democrat member who has not been in those facilities to go down there and to take a position that says, well, we want to cap the number of people that you can contain of these violent, criminal, illegal aliens. Now, think about that. They're wanting to say, okay, let's decide the degree of danger that this person may pose and then decide if they are going to be detained or not. If you are in this country, if you're trying to come to this country, if you're a criminal, illegal alien, you don't need to be here. You need to be detained and you need to be deported and barred from ever coming back into this country.
But bottom line, Senator, will you sign this?
I don't know if he is going to sign this.
What about you? Will you vote yes to this agreement?
I'm not going to support something that reduces the number of beds or says we're going to open up our borders. I think that it is outrageous that people continue to say, oh, we need to just open the border and let people walk into this country, not knowing who they are, why they're wanting to come here. When I talk to Tennesseans every single day, they will say, you need to secure the border, end all this push of fentanyl and heroin onto our community streets, end this push of gangs, sex traffickers that are really disrupting life for so many law-abiding Americans. And when you talk to angel families and angel moms and you hear their stories, I have an angel mom in Tennessee right now rearing her grandson because her daughter was killed by an illegal alien who was a drunk driver. And you know what, Maria? They can't find that guy now. He left the country. Another family that you have talked to, the Corcorans, their son, he is dead. He was killed by a drunk driving illegal alien. This is a problem we can fix. It means secure the border. As the president said, walls work. Talk to Israel. Go to San Diego. Talk to El Paso.
All right, so you will not support it if it includes a decline in the number of beds. Dagan, you just heard her.
You've got to have a way to put a place to put people.
This deal, though, is not expected to include that. According to the Wall Street Journal reporting this morning, the deal gives both parties something they'd sought. The Democrats keep funding for physical barriers along the border below President Trump's request level. It was at $5.7 billion. The deal includes $1.38 billion for 55 miles of modern physical barriers. But this is the Journal. But Republicans blocked Democrats' efforts to place certain limits on detention beds, an issue that had derailed the talks over the weekend. So
I read that also, Dagan, and I think that is one of the things that is vitally important. How can you put the Border Patrol in the position of saying, we're not going to give you money for beds, and you have to decide the level of danger that somebody would pose to a community in this country?
What about the $1.38 billion? That's below the $1.6 billion the Senate Democrats offered in December. Shouldn't we at least be getting $1.6 billion in funding for the border wall?
I think we need to go back and look at the $30 billion that was originally on the table, and then the offer was 20, and then it was 12, and then it was 5.7. My hope is this. There are plenty of unobligated funds that are in this budget, and in order to secure our southern border, my hope is they will begin to use some of these unobligated funds, because the more we secure it and the more we end the trafficking of drugs and the trafficking of human beings and the trafficking that is coming with the gangs, the safer our communities and our city streets are going to be.
So what you're saying is then you will support this deal if it's not included in any cuts in beds, and you will support it knowing that maybe the president can use other monies that are unaccounted for that have already been approved.
Maria, once I get to see the details, we don't have details yet. We have an agreement in principle.
Right.
And once the details come out, we'll be able to decide exactly how we're going to support this or not.
Senator, let me move on to some of these ideas from your colleagues on the left. The president also last night slammed the Green New Deal at his rally last night, saying this Green New Deal from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will hurt the economy. Let's listen to the president. Then I got to get your take on some of these other ideas being thrown out there. AOC is hitting back at the president's comments. She tweeted this today. After the president said that it's going to hurt the economy, she writes this: yes, a man who can't even read briefings written in full sentences is providing literary criticism of a House resolution.
Last week, they introduced a massive government takeover that would destroy our incredible economic gains. They introduced the so-called Green New Deal. It sounds like a high school term paper that got a low mark.
I mean, it's pretty incredible to hear AOC come back and criticize the president. I mean, here's a woman who she's a freshman congresswoman, but she's got a lot of name calling and a lot of things to say about other people.
Well, they've tried different provisions of this Green New Deal through the years. You remember back in 2007, they tried a part of this. Look, if they had their way, FedEx would be out of business. So all of these packages that people are getting from online shopping, that delivery would come to an end. You would see cattle farming, the biggest part of our ag sector in Tennessee, that would come to an end. You couldn't go grab a steak or a hamburger because they would end that cattle farming. And I don't know about you, but Pals or Bell's in Tennessee that make great hamburgers, I like to pick one of those up. you would see an end to all of the fossil fuels. You think about no service stations, all of those jobs would go away, refining jobs would go away, the logistics industry and all of those jobs, all of that would go away. So I don't know how they plan to pay for this. And there is a true disconnect between saying, here is the utopia that we would like to have, and you can get around on a bicycle or on your feet. Maybe they think they're going to be the pedocrats and not the Democrats.
You know, what bothers me, Senator, and Dagen, you've done this so well, basically explaining what some of these plans mean. Like, you're the one who pointed out the expense of Medicare for all and the Green Deal and how much it's costing. You never get those kinds of details when you have these pie-in-the-sky ideas.
Let me repeat this. And they fouled up by really telling us, revealing their idiocy, releasing that FAQ by accident from her office last week, which they tried to walk back and then had to confirm that it did
money
come
to
out
people
of her office.
unwilling to work.
And by the way, you can hardly find this plan on her website. You have to go in and do a search of the House.gov archives to find the actual legislation that's been filed. But the great liberal lie is that the rich, the very, very rich, are going to pay for all of this and nobody else has to pay for it. It is the middle class and lower income citizens who get burdened with the higher cost. We use gasoline because it's a cheap form of fuel. We are a giant nation with very little rail infrastructure, and we like to drive everywhere. And it's not that expensive.
Take a train to Europe.
You tell people that they're going to have to use electric cars, which are wildly more expensive based on current technology, and you are hurting poor people. You're hurting the middle class in this country.
That's exactly right.
Be honest with them.
How about some honesty, right? I mean, really. Senator, it's great to get your insights as